What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to the Take the North podcast, along with Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I am Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. Danny boy, it's been a while, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, we went like a week and a half without recording together on the podcast, so it's good to see you. I hope you're recharged. Looks like you got a haircut while you were down and away.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I got I went to I believe it was a Supercuts. And as soon as I walked in, the lady said, "Oh, do you want your usual? Do you want the 0 to 1?" And honest to God, Dan, I had never in my life been to this place. So they were mistaking me for somebody else. And I sat down in the chair and I go, absolutely, give me the 0 to 1. And then this came. So I've been getting decent compliments on it, and I always have bad hair days.
I like it. Look,
Thank
like you're a guy that became known in the media room at some point as having the flu stew, right? Like, and so now I guess we're gonna have to learn Ben Johnson's haircut tendencies, and you're gonna have to try to emulate those at some point. But for now, this is pretty sharp, and like we're 2 weeks out from the combine. You're gonna be walking the halls in Indy with this fresh do, and I like it. I like where you're at.
Thank you. No, that I appreciate it. This accidental haircut is awesome, and I've been getting nothing but great compliments on it. So I appreciate that, Dan. Thank you. I'm just trying to keep up with you and studs with the good hair going on. We have a lot to discuss on the Take the North podcast today, including something that happened, a couple of weeks ago that Dan and I have collectively, he and I both respectively, have discussed Virginia McCaskey and her passing away at 102. But Dan and I have not gotten to talk about this together. Dan's been how long you been on the beat now, Dan?
I'm going into season 13, which is kind of impossible to believe, to be honest with you. It like almost makes my whole body shudder because it's like, man, time has gone quick.
Yeah, well, then I want to start with you because I've been on the beat full time since 2018, have had, some interaction with Virginia McCaskey. But what jumps to mind when you think about Virginia McCaskey?
Well, there's two things from my personal experience that will jump out. And one, I shared a little bit of it when Mark Potash was on the show last week. In 2019, when we went to the owners' meetings in Arizona, we had an opportunity to introduce Virginia McCaskey to podcasting. And so Rich Campbell and I at the old Bear Download podcast run by the Chicago Tribune had Virginia McCaskey on as a guest from the 2019 owners meetings. That was going into the NFL's 100th season. Perfect time to revisit history with her. And I can still vividly, I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps right now because I can still vividly remember the setting in this room at the Biltmore and just talking for, 25 minutes with a woman who had experienced everything that there was to experience with Bears football, right? Like you're talking about a lady who had been on the barnstorming tour with Red Grange, at that point and had been through every chapter of Bears history, and not only had been through them, but remembered them all very vividly. And she would go through the championship games that she was in attendance at and share some memories of that. So I had a chance to, kind of dig back into that for a piece I wrote on Sunday for the Chicago Tribune about some of the things she shared in that encounter, as well as some other things. And then Bears 100, you remember that weekend in Rosemont in 2019 and how electric that was. And she was a panelist for a session on, I think it was the Sunday morning session. And was able to share with an entire audience some of these memories. And it was impressive on multiple levels. Number one, the sharpness of her memory deep into her 90s and then what was ultimately into her early 100s was second to none and truly impressive. And the time you spent around Virginia McCaskey, you saw the kindness of her. And when I had an opportunity last week to reach out to people in the Bears family who were mourning the loss, consistent theme, Grote, was look like the McCaskeys become a punching bag for Bears fans, and justifiably so because of the on-field failures and things that go with that. But they're good people, and they're a good, generous family. And she, at the top of that family tree, is a big reason for that. So those are the couple things that jump to my mind. I'd be curious to know in your time now what you would attach to your memories.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's awesome for Virginia. I'm just trying to put myself in her place back in 1983 when she officially takes over the team, and how overwhelming that had to be, the loss of Muggs Hallis. And she takes over in 83, and a year later you have the becoming of the Bears in 1984, where they go to the playoffs. It was like the world was being told in 1984 that the Bears were about to be great. The year they beat Washington in the playoffs, and then they lose to San Francisco in the NFC title game. And then the next year, it's the Bears rampage. So I can't imagine what that was like for her, in that, yeah, you're it. And guess what? You're about to go through the best time this franchise will have had up until right now. And I'm not saying that now is good, but I'm just saying, like, the fortuity of taking over then had to have been quite the blast for her. So I think about that right away, and what she must have been thinking, and how that must have felt, and how maybe she even thought, oh, this is easy. Let Jim Finks and Jerry Venisi and Mike Ditka put this team together. So, and then I do want to follow up what you're saying, Dan, because I think that's important that you mentioned the good people factor of this, because I think a lot of times we just say those things, and even without knowing people. But I think that you and I have both been, I've had very little interaction with Virginia McCaskey. I've met her, I've shaken her hand, but really I have not even gone as deeply as you have in terms of conversating with her in any way, shape, or form. But she does carry that vibe around her, the good people vibe. And that's why it can be, in the job that we do, especially with the McCaskey's. And hey, man, I've ripped on George McCaskey, and I probably will again someday, and any of the McCaskey's, but they are good people, which can create conflict in the jobs that we do too on a daily basis.
It can, and I'll share this because we're recording this on Wednesday, and Virginia McCaskey is being laid to rest, and her funeral services are at St. Emily's Catholic Church in Mount Prospect this morning. And Cassie Carlson, friend of the podcast, shared some of the visitors and attendees that she saw checking in. Those included Roger Goodell and John Mara, Kim Pagula, Kevin Warren, obviously, Ben Johnson, Brian Urlacher, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton, Matt Forte, Lovie Smith, Leslie Frazier, Robbie Gold. Those are some of the names that Cassie put on social media as those who arrived at the funeral. Kevin Fishbane and I took a ride over to the visitation on Tuesday to pay our respects to both Virginia and the family. And, to see the line of people getting into that gathering, and the visitation there was compelling, because these are a lot of people over a lot of decades who have had different interactions with the family, with the team. And you feel that in that presence, and you get into this room where Virginia McCaskey is being presented and in the open casket, and you see all the flowers from people around the league, and you see the notes as you're waiting in line, and you're just like, wow, the reach of this woman and the amount of football history and football, I guess, history that she's touched is truly impressive. And then obviously when she had 9 living children there, obviously at the services, 11 children in all, and 40 grandchildren. You look around and everybody is, up there, and you're just paying your respects and realizing how many people this woman had a direct impact on in her family. And then you see outside, when it is a line that takes 2 hours to get through, how wide reaching her presence really was.
Yeah, no, it was. And, you bring up the family members, and, it's necessary to talk about what could potentially be next with, Virginia McCaskey having passed away, what could change with the organization. I know that for decades, Dan, there have been whispers of, could the Bears someday sell? When Virginia McCaskey passes away, what will happen with the Chicago Bears? Anything can happen, Dan, but and the people that I've talked to and the vibes that I get, it doesn't seem like anything's going to happen anytime soon with the Bears. And
correct.
I'll just say it, in our lifetime, I don't know that we'll see the Bears sold. I'm not saying that they won't be sold, but in our lifetime.
Yeah, I won't go that far. I will echo the sentiment you shared, just in terms of forever. The public expression from the family has been, we are going to own this football team. And I think Pat McCaskey was the one famously quoted as saying, until the second coming, right? Like, they have no designs on giving this up. Things can change, and we'll see where that goes. But even in the conversations last week, after Mrs. McCaskey passed away, you get a similar sentiment that there is no urge or intention of selling the football team. And you also realize that, look, like Virginia McCaskey lived to be 102 years old. This didn't sneak up on anyone in the family. These discussions have been had for a long, long time, and they've taken measures to be able to, I don't know what those measures are, but to be able to retain the percentage of ownership that's needed to be retained to be able to keep the decision-making process in your hands, right? There's always things that come with who owns the majority of the shares, right? And so what happens with Virginia's ownership as the principal owner, and we don't know those answers, but we do know that the family has been very, very steadfast and consistent with their messaging of saying, look, like we are going to own this team until we don't own this team anymore. And it doesn't feel like there is going to be an immediate urge to sell, but things can change. It's a wild league, and things are changing with the league dynamics all the time in terms of what is allowed with ownership, and those things can impact this discussion. And so we'll have our eyes on it out of the corner of our eye for sure.
One of the ways that things could change, and my prediction is my prediction, but one of the ways they could change is that, look, there's going to be investors and people with lots of money around the world who know what's going on with the Bears and might make an offer they can't refuse too.
I mean you're talking like 12 billion, right? Like, yeah. I mean, like, put those zeros in front of anyone and then ask them, are you sure?
That's it. That's the part. Now, like we kind of talked about, the McCaskey's are different in terms of if it was her will that the team not be sold, and if that is something, there's things that we may not be privy to in terms of that, then maybe they can't with good conscience sell the team. I doubt that that's completely left open for them, but I just think that there's a lot of things that we don't know at this point. Moving on a little bit here, Dan, one of the things that I really want to talk about here, it's kind of wild. Like, I'm laughing right now about this because I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But the whispers in the NFL right now are that the Chicago Bears could be, and actually Adam Schefter is predicting that the Bears will open their season against the Philadelphia Eagles in the opener of the 2025-2026 NFL season. That would be the lid lifter for the NFL on a Thursday night. Again, I stress, this has definitely not been made permanent, but there is some momentum towards that. What do you think of that, Mr. Wiederer? Wiederer.
I'm trying to pull a couple things up here so we can enhance the discussion, but I will tell you that the buzz of this is absolute gold for a podcast like Take the North, right? Like, this is an awesome February topic to figure out who will be opening the regular season in September on a Thursday night against the Eagles. I would understand the attraction of the Chicago Bears entirely. You've got a new coach. You've got a very fascinating quarterback who's going to be looking to take a big leap in his second season. You have the Eagles coming off the Super Bowl championship and getting ready to raise their banner or whatever they do on opening night. And you feel how compelling that is. Like, I've thought since Ben Johnson was hired, an awesome opener for the Bears would be Sunday night at Detroit. Just send them right back to Detroit for game one. Let's get that out of the way right away.
Yeah.
But I can't find a reason to push back on Bears Eagles in the Thursday night opener either. And I think I might sign up for it too, right? Like, if they gave me a vote, I think I might say, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's give that a whirl.
I mean, obviously the Bears have not, we could think of some real whoppers where they opened their season or the NFL seasons badly, but I love it. I love when the Bears are either in prime time or were they the NFL lid lifter in 18 and 19?
Just 19. They were a Sunday nighter in 18.
That's right. So they were close in 19.
Because typically the Super Bowl champion opens on that Thursday night. 19 was different. It was the NFL's 100th season, and so they gave that's the 1 year where it was the free pass to make the Bears Packers occupy that stage. But yeah, the 19 game was not a good lid lifter.
No, it was one of the worst. It was so disappointing. I mean, the anticipation after what the Bears had done in 18, they were booed, I think, in the second series of the game or something like that. First quarter, it was 6-3 the final?
10-3, I think, was the final.
10-3, the Packers beat the Bears. There was parades in the city. Everybody was so excited. Like, I was excited. I think, there were people playing. I mean, Chance the Rapper there was rumors he was going to do a show in the middle of downtown Chicago. The city was sprouting, and then the Bears laid an egg, and they were booing at Mitch Trubisky at Soldier Field in the year he was supposed to become the MVP.
And like the craziest thing about all of that, and not to get too far off topic, was they went and won their next 3 games, right? Like they got to 3-1 after that total turd, and it wasn't an impressive 3-1, but it was like, okay, this team figured out how to stay above water, and then the season just never got going, and everything that we had talked about at Bears 100, everything we had talked about coming after that division championship season in 2018, it just fizzled, and it hasn't been the same since, as you and I have talked about many times on this year's show. Let me give you the full slate of Eagles home opponents for 2025, because this will give you an opportunity to understand what else is possible for that opener.
Okay.
We're going to play the division, right? Obviously, Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders. Commanders game certainly a candidate for that Thursday nighter. That's a rematch of the NFC Championship game. Jaden Daniels, every bit as intriguing as Caleb Williams. You could easily justify putting that in that slate. They're also going to play the Lions out there in Philadelphia. That's a game that also has some appeal to it, where you've got the 2 best teams in the NFC from 2024. That could be intriguing, although the Lions have lost a lot from their coaching staff, which maybe diminishes it a little bit. The Bears, as we mentioned, the Rams, the Broncos, and the Raiders. Can't really justify a Broncos or Raiders appearance in that opener. You could justify Cowboys probably. Who wouldn't want the debut of Brian Schottenheimer to be on prime time?
I mean, look, Dallas always gets numbers, so Dallas is always in play.
It's a possibility. The Rams there, but look, like it, again, made for podcast conversation in February, and I kind of like it. Usually, I'm the curmudgeon who's like, this is silly, this is stupid. Stop talking about this. I'm into this one.
I am too. I mean, my first reaction was, "Oh, you want the Bears for that opener? Okay, all right." I don't know. I'm not really sure why. I mean, you laid it out pretty well, Dan. But there are better matchups, I think, for opening night. But I am not mad about the possibility of the Bears opening it. Why not? Let's keep it splashy for the Bears, and that's what would be accomplished.
I think it also kind of opened my eyes to the idea that Ben Johnson is a headliner right now, right?
He is.
When you add that to your stage, with a stage that already has some headliners, now you've got some pull. And so when that schedule comes out, in May, we may be seeing some primetime games sprinkled throughout there more than we've seen in recent years, right? Like, just because it is Chicago, and now you feel like there's a little buzz attached to it. Last year you and I hosted at 670 The Score on what was supposed to be scheduled release night, and then they backed the scheduled release up a week, and so we just released our own fake schedule, and which was awesome.
Yeah,
and we're going to do it again here on this podcast. I promise you, because that was a great way to handle that last spring.
Yeah, no, that was very enjoyable. I'm thinking about a couple things here right now, Dan. And when a team like the Eagles, as they did, win the Super Bowl, they beat Kansas City 40-22. The team that wins the Super Bowl, typically we look at them and see what trends have come from them, because that's the blueprint. That's the team that won the Super Bowl. So take what they did and come up with your own version. This is the first year in a while where I look at the Super Bowl winner, the Philadelphia Eagles, and say, oh, any team would have a lot of work to do to put together a team like that. The way the team was put together, to have strong lines on both sides, to have strong position talent guys as well, skill position guys. Obviously, you had the quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who was good enough and earned the MVP in this game. But, man, the way that team has been put together, that's a hard team to sit here and model and say, yeah, just do it like the Eagles. What a dominant performance. What a team they were all year. And I feel like as good as they were and as much attention as they did get, they still were flying under the radar a lot in the last 2 weeks, and that's because of Patrick Mahomes.
It takes years to build a team like that, and that's where you need to get everything right. You need to get your draft picks right. You need to get your free agent signings right, and you just need to assemble a roster that is sturdy like that. I think from the quarterback lens, you see a team that took pressure off Jalen Hurts. They got him one of the best running backs in the game. They put him behind a terrific offensive line. They don't force him to be the engine of everything at all times. And Jalen Hurts has shown the rest of the league what happens when you play that position with a level of aptitude and savvy, right? Like understanding calculated risk, understanding how to take the play that's there for you, understanding how not to put your football team in harm's way. And then you watch the results add up year after year after year, and you see the success add up, and you say, man, like there are some lessons to take out of that Philadelphia Eagles season, and particularly their postseason run, that the Bears can look at and say, like, this is stuff that can be replicated. You're not going to get an identical roster, but understanding how to play a football game in a way where it's on your terms at all times, which the Super Bowl was. And really much of the postseason, the Eagles weren't forced to abandon what they wanted to do, right? Like they were in control of these football games. And when you can play that way, it's impressive. And then I'll flip it back to you on this one, because obviously Sunday was a showcase for a guy that we got to know and got to love, right? Like Vic Fangio, a lifer, 39 years in the league, an absolute grinder, struggles to celebrate his triumphs, always laments his failures. And really cool, I think, for him to have that moment on that stage for people to truly appreciate kind of who he is and how he goes about his business.
Yeah, no doubt, man. He shined in this game. You know, I understand you give it to the MVP to the quarterback, and Jalen Hurts did have a good game, but
how much would you have loved that, right? Like Vic, Super Bowl MVP.
Can you? How about this? What if they had? By the way, did they dump Gatorade on Vic? I don't think they did.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and that would have been funny. It also would have been, I'm just thinking about this. I know this would never happen. I don't know if it's happened since Buddy Ryan, but to have Vic carried over the shoulders.
Yeah.
Like, put me down.
What are you doing? Get out of here. Like, I wish we had the audio of this, because one of my favorite quotes of all time was from 2018. And I think it was coming off of the Buffalo game. If you remember the game in Buffalo where they just hammered the Bills, it was like 41-9. I think they had like maybe 4 turnovers, 2 scores. Leonard Floyd scored. Maybe Eddie Jackson scored. There were a lot. It was a defensive signature performance, and we were trying to get Vic to emote about anything. Like, did that impress you? Did that feel? And I think his direct quote was, "I'm not exactly doing cartwheels and cheetah flips over it." You know, and he just could never enjoy the highs as much as he hated the lows, and you came to love that about him, because his players loved that about him, and they understood how locked in he was at all times. He was going to show up in his sweatsuit. It was 95 degrees out in August, and he'd have the same hooded sweatshirt and sweatpants on, and he was just going to go to work, and he was going to be trying every single day to find some little wrinkle that he could add to the defense that was going to help them play at the highest level. You pair that with players like he had in Philadelphia, and you see the results. And it was cool Sunday to know that was a possibility going into the game, and then to see him follow up on it.
I always felt like his base was like he walked around with a recording of, "This is all so silly," and it said, "Get out." You know what I mean? Like, come on. It's not that hard. You line up 4 guys on the front of the offense. You got 3 guys in the back. You disguise some defense. This is no big deal, guys.
Like, there was never anybody who came to the press conferences weekly, and I think it was for 4 years with Vic, where you knew the answers were going to be short. You know, sometimes they were going to be pretty abrupt, but like you always enjoyed it, right? Like no matter like you know, Vic, can you give us some insight into how you thought Leonard played last week? Good.
Yeah.
So then you'd have to come up, okay, like, let me give you a specific, like, yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
Right.
And then we'd get into some baseball talk with them, and it was just a truly enjoyable dude. And I did share this the other day on 670 The Score, that Peter Schrager had a little nugget on Monday morning talking about how he found Vic down in the bowels and was trying to get him to appreciate the fact that he had just won a Super Bowl, right? Like, pretty cool career achievement. And he was just being like, this doesn't validate anything. You know, I've always been the same coach, you know, and it's like, no, dude, like you need to take a step back at some point and just really appreciate how good that performance was with that team. And he, like, just lovable dude. I can't wait to run across him in the combine hallways in a couple weeks.
No doubt, man. And Dan and I will both be at that combine. We'll be broadcasting live from the combine. I'm looking forward to that already. This version of Take the North had not started during the combine last year, so that opens up all sorts of fun stuff for us in the future. I got 3 more bullet points, Dan, and feel free to jump in with your own bullet points. But I've got 3 here for you that I'd like to discuss. Number 1, I am happy to announce that, and I have it on me because I actually left it at the radio station. My Take the North t-shirt has arrived.
Oh, nice.
The apparel is beautiful. So I just want to remind people about that. And I know, do we have the link for that, Dan? If people, or are we not, or is this not an offering time right now?
Oh no, it's a nonstop offering time. I've got to find the address.
Okay.
You can keep talking, and
All
I'll
right.
see if I can dig it out of my messages.
Yes. So I got myself a nice. Unfortunately, the extra large fits very well. I was hoping that it would be way too big for me, but it fits me perfectly. It is beautiful. It is a beaut. The next thing I wanted to tell people about too is we're recording this right now during the week, but Dan and I will be hosting a show on the Score together the next Monday in life. The next time there is a Monday in your life, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., Dan and I will be on the Score. I imagine there will be hours of Bears talk that day. We may sprinkle it. We may flex our other muscles and some other sports and other things that Dan and I have found interesting. But you're probably going to get a lot of Bears talk on Monday. So
I've got ideas already, believe it or not.
I know you do. I know. That's awesome, man. It gives me a little break from having to try to plan everything at the Score. So that's beautiful. So
I got the link here for you if you want this to.
Oh, yeah. Rock the link. Let's go. Give it out.
BreakingT.com/products/take-the-north. Get there now.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. I'll be honest with you. I did not know because I kind of shut it down last week. Last week was my week to shut it down and not really do anything. I did not realize Potsy did the podcast. Shame on me.
You haven't listened to it yet?
I have not listened to it. I'm
Grote. It was Potsy gold. It was Potsy gold. It really was. I got off the episode and texted him immediately and was just like, that's why we have you around. Like that's you at your best.
Does he think now is he mad that I'm back? Because I think he wants the gig. I think he wants your job or my job because he'll probably fill in for you someday and he's going to be coming for your job. I'm just glad I'm still on the podcast. I'm
glad that you're still on the podcast also. Just kidding, Mark. No, honestly, tremendous. And yeah, I think people gain something, one, from his insight, and two, from when we can kind of let people in on the Potsy persona, which was part of the start of that episode, Grote, which I think you're going to enjoy.
Well, okay. Well, Dan, based on that, I can't wait to see who you're putting together for our Monday show and who we're going to have on and talking, just based on that. So that's fantastic.
2 hours with Brad Underwood. That's where we're going.
Yes, but Illinois head coach, by the way. There's Bears fans like Brad Underwood. What is that?
Yeah. I got some questions for him about making my March a little bit more enjoyable.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll put Brad down. Anything else, Dan? Anything else, or did I take up all the nuggets?
No,
here
I have one good thing here.
Okay.
Maybe a second, but Brad Biggs, my colleague at the Chicago Tribune, went down to Asheville coming out of the Senior Bowl, and he took our award-winning photographer Brian Casello with him to go visit the parents and the high school and everybody that knew Ben Johnson back in his hometown. Brad's story ran online at chicagotribune.com on Sunday, and it's a doozy. I would recommend anybody interested in the new Bears coach to dig in, carve out some time and read it. And I just wanted to share a couple nuggets from there that may tease you over in that direction. Ben Johnson's mother, Gail, pulled out a spiral notebook from when her son was in kindergarten, and he would come home from school in kindergarten at 5 or 6 years old, and he would just write numbers in sequential order in 3 columns in this spiral notebook. 1, 2, 3, 868, 800, page after page after page. And it's this little snapshot into a kid at 5 years old whose mind was working, at all times. And you see some of the early, I guess, I don't want to say genius, but maybe I should say genius, the little early seeds of genius that were there. Brad's story, really kind of dials in. And his mom also shared a story about how when he was about 9 or 10, she'd find little scraps of paper all over his room with plays drawn up. And she knew then that he was into it, and she better not throw those away because she was going to get in trouble if he did. Another anecdote in there from Ben's time in Miami. You got to remember, he spent 4 years in Miami, first as an offensive assistant and then as assistant quarterbacks coach, and gave a presentation. And this story is relayed through Zach Taylor, who obviously went on to bigger and better things in Cincinnati, about how Ben was so convicted about the risk reward or reward risk of going for things on fourth down that he stood up in front of a room of, this is a coaching staff led by Joe Philbin, old school, not quite into the, modern day 21st century analytics. and was so convicted in what he found in his study before analytics was this massive thing, that he had the guts and conviction to be like, listen, we need to be going for it more on fourth down. And it gives you a little bit of, I guess, insight into the passion of Ben Johnson, and also his confidence. When he believes in something, he's going to sell it. And so a lot of stuff in Brad's story. So I'd recommend people finding their way over to that, because you're gonna come away learning a lot more about the new Bears coach.
I love it, and I can't wait to see because there's a learning curve for Ben Johnson too, learning about this roster, learning about what he can exploit in a good way for the Bears. So that is all to come. And I do believe that is all for
last thing, I'm just going to give you some dates, because I've been asked by people in my orbit about the upcoming NFL schedule. And so February 24th, that's less than 2 weeks away. We're going to be in Indianapolis at the Combine. You and I will at least record at least one live episode there, maybe a couple. There's going to be a lot of ground to cover when we get down there. Free agency follows closely behind that. March 12th. For those marking their calendars and saving the date for the opening of that window, March 12th is the opening of free agency, and so we'll be there in a hurry, right? Like, we're gonna have new Bears players before we know it. That's a month from today that there will be official agreements being put into place, and new Bears players to talk about as Ben Johnson gets his start at Haugh Hall off on the right track.
And we'll be tracking it every step of the way here on the Take the North podcast. I promise you that. We will make sure you have all the information, and TTN is absolutely the place to get it. And so, for Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, Adam Stasinski of The Score, and our executive producer, I am The Score's Mark Grote. Thank you so much for listening to and watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.